the way you started working with creators was like podcasters. And I think the way that the relationship worked is that you became like almost like an exclusive sponsor of that podcast. And then you would help them with like, in addition to paying them, you would also help with like production and stuff like that. And then you would have like all these podcasts promote each other. So you could like, basically the way that you were pitching yourselves is like, we're not just going to sponsor your podcast, we're going to help you grow.
Yeah, and I think about that as being really the foundation of our creator program, which to your point started as podcast. And that's really our value exchange to the creators we work with, whether they're audio only creators, newsletter creators, video creators, LinkedIn creators, which is, we're not just a check. We trust the creators to know how best to speak to their audience and to create content that best connects with them and converts them. But we also bring them distribution. So oftentimes creators are being signal boosted across our network, which reaches about 50 million people every single month across our various channels.
Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. For years, HubSpot was known as a pioneer of content marketing, building a huge library of articles that helped attract potential customers to its software products. But more recently, the company has expanded far beyond blog posts and now owns newsletters, podcasts, YouTube channels, and creator-led media brands that reach millions of people every month. Jonathan Hunt, HubSpot's VP of Media, has helped oversee this evolution after working at companies like Vice, Vox Media, National Geographic, and Complex. In our interview, he explained why HubSpot is investing so heavily in media, how it turns content audiences into software customers, and why it sees creators as a major part of its growth strategy. If you want to listen to an audio version of this show, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching this on YouTube, gently tap on that subscribe button so you can watch more interviews with the world's most successful media entrepreneurs. Okay, let's jump into the interview. Hey, Jonathan, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So super excited to talk to you because you run the media arm of HubSpot, which is one of the most exciting companies in terms of this this experiment of creating media but monetizing it primarily through non-media products. Like if anyone who reads my newsletter, this is the stuff that really I geek out over, is because I think there's a much larger opportunity for media out there than just like advertising and subscriptions. And some of the most exciting media companies are the ones that are experimenting with products. A lot of those media companies, they start with media first, then they kind of back into products. HubSpot sort of did the opposite. It was it's primarily a tech software platform that has like increasingly gotten more and more into media. My understanding is like for the first like phase of its existence, a lot of the content it was creating was kind of how-to or kind of evergreen content around like marketing and business and stuff like that. And
lots of SEO content.
Yeah, SEO content. Yeah. And the turning point came, I think, with the acquisition of The Hustle, and that's when it became a little bit more dynamic, newsy, more traditional media brand. So we'll talk about that. Yeah. You run the media arm, and I was looking at your LinkedIn. It looks like you come from like a more traditional media background.
That's right. Yeah, I started in traditional consumer media, and so starting at Vice and then Vox Media, and then Nat Geo, and then Complex, really consistently helping shape the marketing departments of those organizations and finding ways to work even closer with the editorial side to support greater distribution, new ways of thinking about content packaging, and really how to elevate the voices of talent, especially at a time whenever that wasn't so intuitive for a lot of the folks that worked on the various brands that it's a part of. But then to your point earlier, I feel like you, I kind of saw the writing on the wall in terms of traditional media models maybe not as being as sustainable as they once were, and there probably being other non-traditional but still even more sustainable media models out there that aren't necessarily ad supported. And so the opportunity to join HubSpot and help them really take the foundation they had created with their blog strategy and then the acquisition of The Hustle, and really supercharge that and expand it, especially at a time when there's just so much fragmentation across the top of the funnel, and you can't not try to cover as much surface area as possible and be in as many places as possible to stay top of mind for potential customers of HubSpot. The opportunity was just too great to really pass up. And so I've been here now for 3 years, really just helping expand that strategy and really leaning even harder into a video first approach to reaching and converting audiences.
And I'm guessing kind of the appeal of hiring you, as much as they've told you what it is that like not only did you work in media, but you specifically worked on the marketing side of media, so maybe you were a little bit closer to like what was not just like what makes great content, but how does it convert into the various like KPIs and stuff like that, because obviously that's an important component of the media for HubSpot.
Absolutely.
So just to kind of, I'm sure most of my audience know what HubSpot is, but like, so it's primarily a SaaS company that creates like a few core products. Correct me if I'm wrong. One is like a basic content management system with a corresponding analytics. The idea being that it's kind of more business focused, that you could actually create content, publish it to your website, but then also track how traffic comes into that content and converts into actual buyers. Is that component correct?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. The best way to think about it is an agentic platform that helps businesses grow. You could be a small business, a solopreneur, a business of 20 people, or you can be, 2,000 plus enterprise. But it really helps you think about things like building out pipeline and closing deals if you're on the sales side,
That's the
creating
CRM
content.
product.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Creating content if you're on the marketing side, having better resolution rates if you're on a customer success team where so much of your time is being spent manually talking to people, but a lot of that can be solved through AI. And so we've tried to build out an all-in-one platform that takes all the data that you have and just allows you to grow a lot more effectively and efficiently.
And it was an early proponent of what's called content marketing, that every business, in an effort to like, rather than spending all their marketing funds on kind of ephemeral ads that lose their value the second that your ad buy is over, is like you should be building basically this growing repository of content that you will own forever. You will, a lot of it will be evergreen, so you'll be able to capitalize on it forever. But then will also help you in developing a more direct connection to your customer base, and also over time lower your customer acquisition costs. That's been kind of like a main thesis even prior to its current kind of media phase, right?
Yeah. So a couple things there. It compounds. So to your point, with traditional paid media, as soon as you spend it, it goes away. With content, oftentimes we're seeing videos that we published 6 months, 2 years ago, getting a ton of viewership randomly 2 years later, 6 months later, and that just pays dividends for us. And so it amortizes, over time, but also compounds in terms of value. The second thing too is that it's not traditional advertising. If you think about your own consumption behaviors, you're scrolling on your feed, like you might be attracted to an ad, but you're probably more attracted to a person that you recognize or trust to deliver information to you, and therefore the intent with content is a lot higher. And so there's a bunch of different ways that we think about the role of content in media, but your thesis you laid out is exactly how we think about it as well.
And the prior to the hustle, like it was like there was a very robust content team at HubSpot. You also had this annual conference called Inbound.
Yep.
There was this, but it was like very kind of like how to content, how to, I mean, how to get more, it was basically like marketing and business type content, but from a very kind of evergreen perspective. Would that be like a good summary of like the kind of stuff that it was doing back then?
Yeah. Sorry. So you're exactly right. Was very much focused on how can we reach people at scale across search surfaces. So primarily Google. So very much informed by search signals tied back to key content pillars that tied back to products within the HubSpot ecosystem. So we were focused on marketers, sellers, CS professionals, engineers, people that probably wanted to be a HubSpot customer if they knew HubSpot existed, and were going to Google to try to find answers to questions that they had. And over time, as you get better search ranking, you show up for more of those queries. I think a lot of that just got disrupted with the precipitation of AI. And luckily, 5 years ago, we started to diversify away from just being like a purely search-based content strategy to one that was newsletter, podcast, and that came through the acquisition of The Hustle. And then over the last 3 years, really expanding out into creator partnerships, video, short form social clipping, etc.
Yeah, and so like you buy, or HubSpot buys The Hustle, and that's where your content strategy shifts a little or expands a little to be kind of more top of funnel. So it's this newsletter. It's kind of like, people know it, but it's kind of like a morning brew-esque newsletter that kind of hits the most important like business related news of the day. And this idea is that if you're constantly seeing HubSpot mentioned in the newsletter, not as like the main feature of the newsletter, but in like calls to action, like further down, that they might not be catching you at the exact moment that you need a HubSpot service, but the idea is it's getting more ingrained in your head so that when you are ready, that you need that CRM or you need that content management system or whatever it is, it's like the Geico, but in content form, right? That was kind of the thesis beyond that with that expansion.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, it's like a form of inception almost, in that, software can be expensive, especially if you're a large organization. And most times those large organizations aren't actively trying to change their CRM or aren't in the market to buy something like that. And so it's about how can you be more present in their lives the 95% of the year when they're not making those decisions or having those conversations internally, and to do that across as much surface area as possible. So in your social feeds, on YouTube, in search, your earbuds whenever you're listening to a podcast, through the creators you trust. And that's really been a core focus of our strategy. Another thing too that you mentioned is like, what's interesting about The Hustle is that you're right, it started to get higher in the funnel, but we think about media more mid-funnel in that it can kind of do both. And so The Hustle has a tremendous amount of scale through YouTube, social, and newsletters, and it's reaching, millions of inboxes and millions of people through their YouTube feed every single month. At the same time, it converts a lot of those folks too into high quality leads for our sales team to nurture, hopefully, into customers of HubSpot. And so it's allowing us to really do a lot of the down funnel stuff, but also generate more brand awareness and consideration throughout the year at the top of the funnel as well.
So, and I definitely want to talk about how that kind of lead gen is kind of tracked and stuff like that. But I first want to just give my audience like a full understanding of what the media operations have grown into. So you started with The Hustle. I know that Sam Parr, who was the founder of The Hustle, he then at some point, I don't know if it was after the acquisition or before, co-launched a podcast called My First Million, which now is a hugely popular podcast that is part of the HubSpot network, or at least it was last time I checked.
No, it still is. Yeah.
So walk me through the kind of expansion through The Hustle, because I know at some point you launched like a podcast network. I don't know if that's still going, or how did you continue to do it? And then we'll obviously get to like the acquisitions of Starter Story and stuff like that. But like, how did it start expanding beyond The Hustle?
So I would say The Hustle was the catalyst for the formation of the HubSpot Media Network. And you're right, as part of The Hustle, which was a newsletter and still is, spun out My First Million, which is hosted by Sam Parr and Sean Peary, and is still part of the HubSpot Media Network, and has grown into like a pretty big business podcast that also generates a lot of demand for HubSpot today. But that also then was a signal for us to say, hey, we should probably explore doubling down on our podcast strategy. And where it started was an audio first approach. I think that was kind of driven by that being the sort of default strategy, a couple of years ago. But, one of the things that I really wanted to do whenever I first joined was make a pretty large pivot into video first podcast strategies. And so we did have, and still do have, a video podcast called Marketing Against the Grain, which, as the name implies, is really a focus on reaching Director Plus marketers that are kind of looking for 301, 401 kind of insight into how to think about their marketing strategies in the AI era and actually implement those strategies in a very tactical way. But we've since expanded into more podcasts that we've either built or acquired. We've expanded into more newsletters and also launching a creator network, which is an affiliate network of ours where we work with about 150 different subject matter experts across categories like marketing, sales, entrepreneurship, and AI to be able to bring HubSpot content to audiences that may not know about us but should, and convert them into leads for the business. And that was really the foundation of the model that we're now running today, which led to some of the recent acquisitions, which you alluded to.
So yeah, and then so with the creator network, and I'm friends with Brad Wolverton, who had previously, in a similar role to yours. And I remember him telling me about this years ago, and I'm sure it's evolved since then. But it initially started, the way you started working with creators was podcasters. And I think the way that the relationship worked is that you became almost like an exclusive sponsor of that podcast, and then you would help them with in addition to paying them, you would also help with production and stuff like that. And then you would have all these podcasts promote each other, so you could basically the way that you're pitching yourselves is we're not just going to sponsor your podcast, we're going to help you grow. Walk me through that. Is that still how it is, or has it changed since then?
Yeah, and I think about that as being really the foundation of our creator program, which, to your point, started as podcast, and that's really our value exchange to the creators we work with, whether they're audio only creators, newsletter creators, video creators, LinkedIn creators, which is, we're not just a check, right? We're not handing you a script and saying, please read this in a way that maybe feels inauthentic to your audience. We trust the creators to know how best to speak to their audience and to create content that best connects with them and converts them. But we also bring them distribution. So oftentimes creators are being signal boosted across our network, which reaches about 50 million people every single month across our various channels. We're bringing them to our live event, which is called Unbound, which is in Boston every September. And so in a lot of cases, they're speaking on stage in front of 13,000 people. And to your point earlier, we're buying out a lot of their inventory. And the reason why we do that is that the economics work out a lot better when you are bundling your buys up front instead of doing one-offs and the CPM increasing. You're kind of locked in at a much more cost-effective rate up front if you're buying more inventory. At the same time, the thing that we found is that creators oftentimes like not needing to focus so much on BD, right? So they know that they're working with us over the course of 3 months, 6 months, 1 month, 1 year, but at the same time, they're not having to think about, great, where do I find the next sponsor? Where do I find the next customer? And so a lot of that kind of assurance is really beneficial to them as well.
And you said you LinkedIn influence, so it seems like it's expanded beyond just podcasts.
Yeah, from podcasts originally, and then to YouTube channels, newsletters, and most recently LinkedIn as well.
And so how do you approach these folks? Is it a cohort where you're this is our spring 2026 cohort of 12 influencers that we're working for, or is it more kind of ad hoc? You see someone interesting and you're like, what's your sponsorship rates? We're going to buy 6 months worth of sponsorships. How do you approach these people?
Yeah, so we definitely have longer term partners that have been part of our creator network for years. And we continue to work with them because they like working with us, and we see the ROI. But we also try to replenish our bench of creators as well, focusing on smaller creators, maybe new categories, different kinds of channels and formats as a way to just continue to stay agile and just build out our optionality so that, if we determine we have a big marketing push around Sales Hub, which is one of our products, great, we have this whole bench of sales creators waiting in the wings where we can activate them on a given notice and reach BDRs, SDRs, VPs of sales, CROs within the month, right? And so we just continue to try to stay as agile as possible and experiment with new creators. But there are some creators that we've worked with for many years or many months that we just continue to really enjoy working with and just see a lot of benefit in continuing to reach our audiences through.
And you mentioned the Hustle has expanded into other things. How is that like how big is that organization now, and like what are the other kinds of content you're creating with the Hustle other than the newsletter?
Yeah, so the Hustle today is a newsletter which still publishes daily with the exception of Saturday. It's a YouTube channel, which is a couple 100,000 subs at this point and is publishing weekly. There are social channels as well. And then we also bring Hustle come over to Unbound, which again is our event over in Boston, where we activate and bring our writers out there. They're doing interviews. We have community gatherings and pop-ups. So it definitely shows up in a bunch of different digital and non-digital ways.
What's kind of your video strategy in terms of like the YouTube and other stuff? Is it kind of like what the newsletter is, where it's trying to summarize thing, or are you doing like more like episodic content of like like I see a lot of news organizations trying to create their own formats and stuff like that, whether it's like a question on the street thing or something like that, or is it documentary type stuff?
Yeah, so we definitely have we have a range of formats for the Hustle right now, and it ranges from in the field investigative journalism, where someone is going like actually in the field and interviewing a startup or a founder and CEO and learning about their business and kind of documenting its relevance for the viewer. We have formats where we are kind of diagnosing the difference between brand value and product value and kind of helping people understand, like, is it just brand hype or is the product actually good? And we do that on a sort of vertical basis. We do like an economics format as well, which dives into the economics of a given industry or a different type of product as well. And we do that on a weekly cadence. A lot of our content is also mid-form in length, so a given video might run between 8 to 20 minutes, but clipping is also a pretty big part of our strategy, as you can imagine, because it just gives us more surface area across more social channels where maybe long form isn't necessarily the format that people are engaging with, but they want just like lighter weight, shorter form content to snack on. And so that's kind of like a similar strategy that we applied to all 17 of our channels. So today we're 17 YouTube channels across the entire network that fit, again, neatly into different topical verticals, whether it's marketing or sales or entrepreneurship or AI. But some of it is very kind of like informational and very top of the funnel and more I would say entertainment focused, and is bringing a lot more brand value to HubSpot and probably gets more viewership as a result. And then we have a lot of implementation and tactical style content that is helping people just excel in their careers by learning new crafts or new trades that maybe they didn't have the familiarity with, whether it's understanding how to take like the new Opus AI model update and extract the most value out of it, or learning how to do a new marketing tactic that maybe you didn't know how to do before. And we're actually showing you how to do that. And that kind of content doesn't necessarily get the largest viewership, but definitely drives the more higher intent engagement with it. And as a result, more leads for our business.
In terms of the short form, is it mainly clips, or do you develop like shows and stuff like that that are just like that just live on short form?
Yeah, we do a little bit of both. We don't think about them as shows, more as just like original shorts that are shoulder content to longer form. So if we're in the studio, I'm shooting, then we might tack on a couple of shoots that are more vertical format or shorter form, and they're standalones. Same thing if we're in the field. But then clipping is another part of our strategy, where they're obviously not originals, but derivatives of the mid-forms. And we've gotten pretty good about producing that at scale through a combination of just human taste and editorial expertise, but also AI automation to kind of fill in some of the middle part where historically production might be the blocker, it might slow things down, to just make it easier for us to generate more clip ideas, but also publish them at a much faster clip.
So I'm talking to more and more publishers that are launching like actual shows, not topic-based channels, but like show-based channels where there's like maybe a repeating personality. There's some kind of, I'm not using this pejoratively, but a gimmick of some sort for the show. Do you guys do anything like that?
Not in the short format yet. It's not to say that we won't. We just see right now the most value coming from a bit more substantive content that people stick around for. We've obviously experimented with how can we take our monetization model today for longer form content, whether it's a newsletter format or video format, and apply that to shorter form content, and we just don't see the same kind of conversion rates or ROI. And the thesis there is that you're just not getting enough value out of that 60 or 90 seconds to want to take a deeper action. But that's not to say that that won't change over time. And so we're actively exploring new formats and new ways of monetizing that kind of content.
And for the written content, is it still summary based, or do you have journalists who are like writing profiles or like deep pieces on the website or anything like that?
Yeah, yeah. So on the Hustle, there's still us on the Hustle. There's still the Sunday Story, which is originally written by a journalist on staff, and sometimes we work with third-party reporters to do the investigation and the research, and actually come back with the long form that gets published on Sundays. Whenever you look at a product like Marketing Against the Grain or Mindstream, for example, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit, there is a lot more original reporting coming there as well. So historically, I think we've been in a world where a lot of it was kind of summarization with a unique perspective, kind of like peppered in. I think we're moving more towards a world where it's sort of sits in the middle, where it's a nice mixture of stuff that maybe we haven't produced, but we have a unique perspective on, plus net new original content being produced by our staff of reporters.
Approximately, like, how many people work underneath you on a full-time basis?
Yeah, so there's about 60 people right now across the media team full time. And those folks sit across our content team, which is, video producers and editors, on our newsletter team, which are writers and editors, on our blog team, which is really focused on AEO and SEO content still to this day. We have a monetization team, which, as you can imagine, is really focused on all of the lead magnet creation, but also all of our conversion rate optimization strategy and trafficking of the actual offers themselves, the lead magnets. And then an audience development team, which is really helping drive further distribution and cross-media campaign development for new content launches, big packages that we've spent a long time working on, or also how are we supporting larger cross HubSpot initiatives through our media network as well.
When you say lead magnet, that's like white papers and webinars and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's kind of the older way to think about it for sure. We still do some of that because there is still a value there, but I just, we philosophically believe that the days of wanting to download another state of marketing PDF is kind of dwindling or has died. And so we're trying to shift and have been shifting our strategy more to a place where information is a commodity. You can get that anywhere. How do you get closer to an action or an output? And so how can that lead magnet be really valuable to someone where if they are giving us, 6 or 7 fields of contact information, how can they just generate the marketing strategy with a click of a button? Or how can they actually create the slide deck by uploading the Claude skill to their version of Claude? And so we're getting to a place where lead magnets are becoming Claude skills, GPTs, Gemini gems, AI skills, agents. But then also how can it just be as lo-fi as a Google Sheet or a Google Doc, something that can give you just instant gratification and value as opposed to having to mine the information for that and then make of it what you will. So it definitely has expanded beyond just the traditional white papers and is something that is a lot more utilitarian and is becoming a better conversion engine for us.
What are you able to automate now that you weren't when you were even starting this job from AI? Obviously with the clipping, for instance, there are programs now where you can upload a full-length podcast episode and it'll spit out clips with captions that tries to predict what the most clippable parts of the hour-long podcast and stuff like that. Obviously there's I'm talking to people all the time who are automating even their article writing where they're feeding in transcripts and turning those into case studies and stuff like that. How much are you kind of pushing the edge when it comes to automation for whether it's content production or behind the scenes stuff?
Yeah. So where we're seeing the bigger unlock is from all the time intensive, laborious production stuff that used to take people a long time to do that can be automated. So for anything that we produce, there's always a human at the very beginning that is creating the strategy and sort of setting the creative vision. And a human at the very end that is saying like, is this actually good? And if it's not, how can I make it good? And to make sure that like it's something that an actual human being would want to watch or read or listen to. So that middle part is where I think we've seen the biggest unlock. And so think about like localizing videos into different languages. Traditionally, you would have to take that same video script and outline, ship it off to someone, and have them reproduce it, or it'd be subtitled, right? Or you would have to pay someone to dub it. Tools like HeyGen now allow us to localize English first video content into German, French, Spanish, a few other languages with near 95, 100% fidelity. Like it just keeps getting better and better. And so for markets where, in a lot of companies, North America is the hub. And so as a result, some of these, really important regional markets don't get the same level of resources or investments. And so in a world where you can't recreate this same video team and strategy, something like that is a big unlock, especially when your distribution is getting disrupted because of AI through traditional search. So that's been a huge unlock for us in terms of how we take an English investment and multiply that into multiple languages. Areas like clipping, for example, like you mentioned, definitely a no-brainer, something that we have really accelerated and built out ourselves. But just to sort of go back to the automation. So the automation piece is obviously a huge one. We've actually built out a system internally that uses other, publicly available tools, but allows us to take a video that's published to YouTube that reaches a certain threshold of viewership, and then automate a sequence where that long form video and transcript gets uploaded into Claude. Claude is trained up on past historical viral videos. So that's over time it gets better at sort of like predicting like what makes a great video, identifies a series of time codes within that transcript, feeds it to feeds it to an editor, and then says, okay, great, I want this one, this one, and this one, because I think it's actually going to have a good enough hook where someone's actually going to want to watch it. And once they select that, it feeds it into a tool called Descript, which is a natural language kind of prosumer editor that then anyone, whether you're a social channel manager, a writer, anyone can use it and just say like, tighten this up, make this better, start the hook here, and then publish. And so we've been able to do that for a number of our channels and are expanding that across the entire YouTube network of channels as well, and are seeing some really good results as well as part of that process. Things like research, outlining, script writing, again, while it still requires someone with actual taste to kind of go in there and like punch it up and make it good, a lot of the kind of heavy lifting has been significantly minimized. So those are just like a couple of examples, but it really has unlocked a lot of productivity and just enabled all our team to just operate a lot faster and just do things that previously required a lot of handoffs or were just outside of the realm of possibility.
You mentioned like the automated dubbing and language stuff. Like, does that mean you like actually have like a HubSpot German language YouTube channel or whatever?
Yeah, we do. It's still pretty nascent, and it's growing. But we have one in German, we have one in French, and we have one in Spanish.
So talk to me about like the most recent acquisition strategy. Like I had Pat Walls on the podcast a few weeks ago, and I know there was another recent acquisition. So what are you thinking about from an acquisition standpoint, like where it makes sense to expand?
Yeah. So we've done 3 acquisitions over the last year and a half, and the impetus for all of those were how can we accelerate our media strategy in areas where maybe we felt like we didn't have enough distribution in terms of like the audiences when we in terms of audiences that we wanted to reach, or how can we just do a better job of super serving audiences that we do already reach but want to reach more of. And so with the acquisition of Mindstream a year and a half ago, which was newsletter first, it was very much with the AI slant, as a company that has really leaned heavily into integrating AI into our product and using that as a benefit to our customers, being able to speak to more AI practitioners or people that are AI curious was really important to us. And so there's a world where you build it or you buy it, and because AI just moves so fast, the world of building it and trying to grow that over multiple years just seemed like it wasn't necessarily the world of building it. Just didn't actually make business sense. And so we found Mindstream. We had worked with them as a creator, and they liked working with us, and we saw really great consistent ROI, and we felt like their editorial product was very differentiated compared to a lot of other AI editorial products out there, which were largely AI automated, but also just more kind of like recaps and news of the day, and didn't bring a lot of additive value to what people wanted to get from their AI news. And so we brought them on. They've been wildly successful for us, and we've since expanded them into new channels and brought on more of the editorial into video formats. And so that was Mindstream. Then about 90 days ago, we acquired Starter Story. So like a big impetus for there is that we reach a lot of small businesses really at the time whenever they are just trying to decide what tools to use to go to that next level. And obviously we want HubSpot to be the answer to that question they're asking themselves. And we felt that Pat and Sam and Gus and the team behind Starter Story was doing like a fantastic job of really reaching the sort of like pre-seed, Series A, solopreneur, small business owners. Again, at that time whenever they were building their tech stack, and they were doing that at scale. And we'd also worked with them as a creator. They liked working with us, we liked working with them. We saw consistent ROI, and so it just got to a place where we could again try to build more small business focused media properties or acquire it and accelerate that process. And again, a lot of early wins from that acquisition, and they've been fun to work with. And then most recently, Futurepedia. So Futurepedia is a YouTube-first media network focused on AI. It's actually 3 YouTube channels, Futurepedia, Scale Leap, and Howfinity. So combined, it's about 2.2 million subs. There are also newsletters, there are also websites and communities. But same thing there. What we knew about them is that 1, they reached AI audiences and practitioners at scale. 2, they reached a highly influential, high ASP audience as well. And so not only could we reach more folks that were trying to explore which AI tools to use, but there are also audiences who by and large, they were like higher ASP audiences, and therefore they allow us to reach more of that kind of enterprise level customer who we obviously want to reach more of, and is a big part of our sales strategy. And so that was the impetus behind that. And again, they started from the same place that Mindstream and Starter Story started from. They are a long time part of our creator program. They just got it. They moved fast. They thought about media the same way we did. They had the same kind of vision for what the largest AI media roll-up could be. And we really liked working with them and decided to buy it rather than build. And I think that's kind of the through line for all acquisitions is that 9 times out of 10, they start in the creators program. And it's been a really great incubator for us to determine how deep to go with a creator, how long to work with them, across what channels, and then in some cases acquire them.
And so walk me through the kind of like customer journey, because like back in the kind of SEO days of that era, it's probably you could like track someone coming in through Google, then they would land on the site, and then you could kind of track them as they then click through to the demo page or the contact page and the requested demo, and then there was like a very kind of clean user journey that you could measure ROI on content. But now that media is becoming more fragmented and like you're doing video, they're coming from, they're doing TikTok, podcast, YouTube, all these different sources where they're learning about HubSpot through these places where there isn't as natural, a clicking space. You said that you have like members of your team who like that's their job is to try to measure that ROI. So how is that happening?
Yeah, I mean, Simon, you nailed it. Like, it doesn't make it easy. It's definitely become a lot more fragmented, and it isn't as simple as it once was. But how we think about it is we use content as a front door to the feeds and the inboxes and, the earbuds, of our audiences. And within that content, we are creating a complementary piece of content. It could be, as we were discussing, earlier, a trend report, but it could also be an agent, or it could be a utilitarian kind of experience. And we want it to be so valuable that someone wants to press pause on a video or press pause on their podcast, or maybe deviate from the newsletter they're reading, click on that link and go and check it out. And so within the YouTube experience, now you'll be watching a YouTube video. There'll be this record scratch moment, a live read. They'll be selling in the value of that lead magnet. And then there'll be a QR code, because like so much of YouTube is now being viewed on TV. There'll be a link within the description, and there'll be a pinned comment, and it clicks back to a landing page where you would fill out a form and then be sort of brought into our system. And so we do that across YouTube, we do that across social, we do that across newsletters and a bunch of different surfaces as well. The only, I think, outlier there is probably audio, just because there's nothing to really click on. And oftentimes you're having to rely on people not skipping your ad in the first place, or secondly, remembering that vanity URL that you dropped and wanting to actually go to it. And so we think of audio as, in some cases, it can be a lead generator, but we think about it more as like a brand awareness play and something that really influences and reaches people more, at the top of the funnel.
And how much are you, as like the head of the media team, like talking with the product team about that entire user journey from the media side to the customer side, and thinking about like how do we make this more efficient and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is that with that user experience, we control the roadmap and produce against the roadmap and have the tools to be able to actually build those experiences ourselves. So much of it is in our control and lives within our conversion rate optimization and our audience development team. So if we do want to multivariate test buttons or try different layouts of pages or different offer types or different ways of incentivizing people to take an action, we can do that pretty fast and nimbly.
So what is the larger lesson here for media? Because obviously there's this whole other version of media, traditional legacy media that some of the outlets are doing well, like the New York Times and the New Yorker. But obviously there's a lot of suffering, and a lot of them are adhering to these kind of older business models, like primarily advertising and subscription, where there's just like really diminishing returns because there's because obviously there's the supply way outstrips the demand. Like, do you think that every single media executive should be basically thinking right now, like, what are the non-media products that we should be building, or what are the companies we should be partnering with that build adjacent products so that we can build a more kind of we're not talking about affiliate marketing here, but some kind of like more direct pipeline into what that is, so that we could capture more value out of these audiences that we're not capturing much value out of right now? Like, how should like the larger media ecosystem be thinking about this kind of strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's three things really. The first is what you were kind of alluding to, which is, being able to diversify into different, more sustainable business models. Like, unless you're a niche publisher or you're, Meta or, even like People Inc. or New York Times, right? You're probably not getting the same RFPs. You're probably not getting the same ad rates, and you're probably being squeezed right now. And so a business model that heavily relies on sponsorships, branded content, programmatic advertising. I mean, it's just advertising at the end of the day, like whatever you want to call it, is a very hard business right now. And so how can you diversify away from that in a way that takes less pressure off of those diminishing business lines? Because it's just going to continue to evaporate. I mean, the second is going to be like, how can you own more of the customer relationship or like the audience relationship? And so much media, as you know, right, has just been given away for free. And the value exchange was like, hey, you watch this piece of content, you read this article, you're going to see a zillion banner ads, and we're going to make a couple pennies off of you. And like that can't continue to be it. And I think, obviously the New York Times has done a great job of like trying to build out business models that rely on subscriptions and first party data to be able to become more sustainable, and it's working for them. And the third is like, how can you cover more surface area? And when I say surface area, I just mean like, as we are talking about earlier, it's just like, I mean, for us, like what we see is that before a decision is even made to buy a piece of software, there's about 29 different touch points. And it takes a certain amount of time, and there's usually 6 to 9 decision makers. And that's a lot of touch points where if you're not there, you're probably fading out of someone's mind and you're not making their day one list in terms of what software they want to use whenever, their last software is up for renewal or they're thinking about making a change. So the same thing just goes for brands in general, right? Like if you're not seen and you're not visible, then you kind of don't exist anymore. And so that's kind of how we think about our own media strategy, which is how can we be in more places more often and more consistently throughout the year in a high quality way that brings value to people and helps them really think differently about their professions and advance in their careers. And then ideally get them to take a deeper action with us and become a customer of HubSpot. And so I think those are like the 3 principles that we obsess over and just try to prioritize. And I think it's really relevant for any media company today.
So when you look ahead, like 3 years from now, what do you want to be doing? Like where do you see opportunities for expansion? Do you think it's like a larger creator network? Do you think like acquiring more media startups? Do you want to be competing with like Bloomberg or the Wall Street Journal in terms of like in terms of like public business journalism and stuff like that? Like where do you want to continue to expand?
Yeah, I mean the thing is that we're already bigger than many like traditional B2C business publications, and that wasn't intentional. It's just that that's a result of us scaling as fast as we've been able to scale and across more formats like video and podcasts and like newsletters. But I think a big focus of ours is definitely creators and just capital J journalists, and really trying to give them an opportunity to do what they do best, but in a non-traditional media model, and through them reaching more of our customers that maybe don't think about us or know about us today, but should. And so it's like become a really big part of our strategy, both from a acquisition perspective, but also from a partnership perspective, and also from a talent perspective, where oftentimes we're now bringing creators on screen in our own content, or they're writing newsletters for us, or they're contributing to our Unbound event in September, or they're writing thought leadership pieces and op-eds on our website. And that's just going to continue to be a focus of ours and continue to expand. And so I would say it's going to be just a big priority for us. And then we're just going to continue to really focus on just squeezing even more value out of our video content. Like I mentioned, we're 17 YouTube channels today. We publish 90 long forms, hundreds of short forms. The great thing about video is that it can be repackaged and morphed into so many different non-video formats, newsletters, text, audio, etc. And so that investment pays dividends in a bunch of different ways. And I think, we're doing a lot of that already, but there's just so much more that we've left on the table that we're just going to continue to focus on.
Okay, Jonathan, those were all the questions I have for you. Where can people find you online?
I'm on LinkedIn, but I would say, go to My First Million, go to The Hustle, go to Marketing Against the Grain, go to Futurepedia, go to Starter Story. Like, I don't want to list all 17 brands, but you can find us pretty much anywhere. You're looking for AI content, you can find us anywhere you're looking for like good business content today.
Awesome. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you.